Dog on the boards. Good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning, Maine. We have more signals for you up into Maine where they need more good news talk, including 98.7 FM HD2. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the Pulse of an H and our poll question up on X at the Pulse of an H. Here we go. We are into summer, July 13th. Have you taken a summer vacation yet? Yes or no? Just curious if you're doing that. 'Tis the season. Hopefully you had a good weekend, and we have a great newsmaker out of the gate, remembering U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham right here in New Hampshire. Many times on this program, and many of our guests this morning will fondly remember the senator and someone who worked with him quite a bit and very close. And I did reach out to our delegation, but Governor Kelly Ayotte, former senator, remembering Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, the governor, sharing some thoughts this morning. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H. Governor, your thoughts on your friend's passing?
Yeah, good morning, Jack. Just heartbreaking, really so shocking. He was a phenomenal person. We were very close in the Senate. You know, I've worked closely with him on the Armed Services Committee. We still remain friends and in contact. And I just have to say, no one really was as passionate about national security, our military, American freedom than Lindsey Graham. I mean, he, as you know, he just came back from Ukraine and he passed away. Vladimir Putin couldn't stand him. The Ayatollahs couldn't stand him. You know why? Because he always went after those who wanted to suppress the freedom around the world and make us less safe, and the terrorists. So such a huge loss personally. He was one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. There won't be much laughter in the Senate without Lindsey Graham. And he also just brilliant guy, legal background. He served in the Air Force for 33 years. Loved our military.
Retired as a colonel, right? Retired as a colonel.
Yeah, the first time he did, he retired as a colonel. The first time we met, actually, or really got to know each other, is when I first got elected to the Senate. The Senate leader had asked several of us to go to Afghanistan and Pakistan with him. Also, Marco Rubio was on that trip, and Lindsey Graham was on the trip, but he was actually going over there to do his military duty in Afghanistan. And of course, we instantly became friends, and we served on the Armed Services Committee. We traveled so many places around the world, and also with our late friend, John McCain, really just fighting to keep America safe. He was such a strong voice in that Senate. I can't even tell you what a big loss this is.
Governor, you did reference the senator's sense of humor, and I do recall over the years, if he was on talking about his own ambitions, if he was running for president or another colleague, he would just always start off with a joke on the show. He was just very, very, his sense of humor was a little stronger than I think people understood. He was very witty, very funny.
So, yes, yep. Hilarious. Like the stories he told, he would have everyone laughing. He could make you laugh in the moment where you just needed that laugh. And he's so self-deprecating, making fun of himself and making fun of other people in a good way. And just, I can't tell you in the caucus, in the Senate, but across both sides of the aisle, like no one can make people laugh like Lindsey. And we know we need more laughter in politics, especially in Washington.
I think we need more laughter in our life these days. Governor,
right.
I want to ask you before I let you go, you've probably seen it and have ignored it, but I was just looking, including New Hampshire, and we have one of our, Alicia Preston-Xanthopoulos is going to come on because she spoke up about this. Some of the vitriolic venom where people, even on the Senator Graham's death, have to say something very mean politically on their page. And I'm looking at what has gone on. Where does this come from?
I think it's disgusting. I don't know where this comes from. This was a wonderful person. This is someone whose parents died when they were 20 years old, adopted his sister, loved our country, served our country. And you can disagree with people on policy, but it's just appalling to me that people will go after someone personally after they have passed. And I just find it as someone who was his close friend, loved him.
Yeah.
It's appalling to me, but just to do that with anyone.
Yeah. Well, imagine South Carolina, talk about a big hole.
Huge hole. I mean, they had Strom Thurmond who served forever.
Yep.
That's who
Yep.
Lindsey came after, but Lindsey really was such a force in the Senate, not just on foreign policy, which he was probably the top senator on foreign policy in the U.S. Senate, but also on domestic policy. He could work across the aisle and get things done.
Yeah, well, I'm going to let you go, Governor Kelly. Remembering her friend, Senator Lindsey Graham. I'm not sure. I'm sure there going to be something in South Carolina. Are you going to be attending any services, or just curious?
I will attend any service for Lindsey Graham. He was a dear friend, and I'm going to miss him so much.
All right. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just many times on my shows over the years, interviewed Senator Graham, and all I remember is, and here's another interesting fact I'll recall, and Neil Levesque and maybe Dean Spiliotis and some of our academic friends coming up will remember this, but J-Dog, I don't know if you remember this. You might. Who else was a character that a lot of people didn't realize how funny he was? And I know Mike Dennehy can speak to this, who was on the show the other day, but the late Senator and presidential nominee candidate, John McCain. He was a very funny person, what I would call old school funny, dry, sense of humor. He poked fun at himself, which is, I think, a compliment. And I just remember McCain and Graham, the two of them, and I'd have them on. We're talking New Hampshire because both were up here an awful lot. McCain winning 2 primaries here for presidential primaries. McCain up here a lot, speaking or on behalf of different issues. Very familiar with New Hampshire. And they always would poke fun at me or have a good what I call witty way to open or witty comment, and you'd have to think twice to catch it. And the governor just was talking about how much that's going to be missed in the Senate because there's not much humor in the Senate anymore. But I would argue that's true in life. And some of the stuff I saw online right here out of New Hampshire, some folks who've been involved in politics, but they're on the other side of the aisle. I'm not sure what side they're on. They're on that, I think, that far left side. And some of the vitriolic stuff that people were saying about Lindsey Graham, I'm like, really? Oh my goodness. Because this was a very interesting, nice person, regardless of your politics. And he served in the National Guard more than 30 years, or the Air Force Reserves 30 years, and more than 30 years in the Air Force Reserves, and retired as a colonel. And if you're supportive of Ukraine, he was one of the fiercest supporters of supporting Ukraine in the fight against Putin and Russia. And I don't know why you could, just can't, don't say anything, but some of the stuff, but you know what? It shouldn't surprise me because we live in this crappy, toxic environment. And I think 8 or 9 out of 10 people recognize that this was a pretty interesting person. And in today's day and age, not that old, but apparently, and they're still studying and looking, and they will, and, having what they call the hardening of the arteries around the heart. And sometimes when someone like that has that heart attack or that rupture, it doesn't matter. Was a doctor friend told me this morning early that even if someone like that had that in a hospital and actually suffered that inside the hospital, already there, it's hard to stop or save that. So, but a sad story, and certainly a hole in the American political landscape, and there'll be a special election in August for that. Meanwhile, the governor of South Carolina will nominate someone in the interim for the short time. Someone who knows a lot about the process, Brad Card, one of our political analysts at All Stars, co-host of Contact Politics, will be joining us in a moment. He worked a lot with these senators, and certainly over the years, a lot of contact with Senator Graham. Coming up, we got a full show for you. By the way, I didn't get to it. It's going to be hot again this afternoon, but again, it is. Can't believe it's getting to mid-July, but tomorrow, the real hot stuff returns up near 100 for much of our listening region tomorrow. Tuesday, July 14th, another hot one could possibly set a record up near 100, or the real feel will be at least 100. And as we get into the week, we'll update you on some of the other news talk. Hey, Alexa, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Return with Brad in a moment.
Sundays at 3. Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, we have a lot going on, and hot J-Dog, the hot stuff is coming back to later tonight and tomorrow. I don't know if you saw that. Hot, like up near the 100. So that's tomorrow. We're going to be in the upper 80s by this afternoon. Beautiful day, though, yesterday. Not as hot, nice, cool. It was beautiful, not cool, but nice breeze yesterday. Just gorgeous day yesterday. And really beautiful weekend, whatever you were doing. Big news with the announcement or the news of Senator Lindsey Graham. And I would say Brad Card, Brad, of course, one of our political analysts and all-stars and co-host of Contact Politics. I would say, Brad, of all the national newsmakers, and we just had Governor Kelly Ayotte remembering Lindsey Graham. She said one of her fondest friends in the Senate, the best sense of humor, but of course, close with former Senator John McCain. Probably of all the national leaders out of Washington, presidential or senators, Lindsey Graham probably had more air tickets up into New Hampshire over the last decade or two than most, and he was very familiar with New Hampshire, and a lot of people knew him. But just your thoughts, because you know these, you knew him, worked with him. I mean, you were with him a lot, and just your thoughts, Brad Card, on the senator's passing.
Yeah, it's really sad, and it's going to leave a big void in the United States Senate. During that 2016 race, I was with Governor Bush, who was running for president, as you remember. But I got along great with Lindsey Graham. I actually had dinner with him after the debate that they had at St. Anselm College with Pam Patnote as well, who was went on to be deputy HUD secretary. He was a larger than life kind of guy. There wasn't a political issue that he didn't get involved in. He was deeply involved in the politics of the Senate as well as the policy, which was a little different than most. He worked across the aisle. He would bring people together. He was working on a Russian sanction bill with Senator Blumenauer, and that was really festering. He's been the biggest supporter of Israel and the Ukraine in the United States Senate. And the other void that this is going to leave is Republicans are talking about doing a third budget reconciliation bill. And that reconciliation bill, it starts with the budget committee. He was chairman of the budget committee in the Senate. It's going to make the Senate's work that much harder, and it's going to dig in. I mean, he voted as a member of the Judiciary Committee. He voted for Democrats who were appointed, Democrat nominees for the Supreme Court, which is now unheard of, as you know. And Washington's gotten so partisan, you don't see that crossover from the parties. It's going to be a big void, and he was an impeachment. He was one of the impeachment prosecutors for the Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton was being impeached, he's left a big mark on the Hill. It's going to be a big loss for Congress and in South Carolina, and then we're going to have to see what happens there as well. That opens up a whole new can of worms in South Carolina's political process as we start to head into this election. He was going to be on the ballot this November up for re-election. So
what does that do for the process now in that district? And of course, Brad, one story you and I have not discussed is Mitch McConnell. There was pictures this weekend, ironically, from the hospital bed with his wife. The governor of that state had to ask for his condition. People are wondering if he's, kind of with it, or, how bad his attack was, and he's been in failing health. What happens to some of these seats in the process?
Well, from what I understand about McConnell, he's been in contact with the leadership of the Senate. He's been in pretty close contact with them. And don't forget, Governor Beshear is a Democrat. And I think that there's a little politics there kind of play that they didn't know what was happening with Senator McConnell.
Yep.
Not that politics would play into something like that, Jack. So I think McConnell. I think McConnell will be there. He's out anyway. He's not running. He's going to finish his term.
Okay.
And it sounds like he had a fainting spell of some sort and was hospitalized, and then he had pneumonia. So he's no spring chicken, and I think that's the reason why he chose not to run.
Yeah.
Those were kind of his words, which was smart.
Yeah. Well, he's been having these episodes of falling. And hey, Brad, let's go back to Lindsey Graham. You're talking about having dinner with him up in New Hampshire after a debate, or wherever that was. Would just speak about, was he one of the funniest U.S. senators? And I'm being serious, like the best sense of humor. He just always seemed to me to lead with a joke. He was very witty, and Governor Ayotte said he was the funniest member of the Senate. Made you laugh. Did you find the same?
Yeah, he was very quick-witted, and he would play sarcasm, which was kind of funny. I mean, he was definitely a funny guy, and I wasn't super close with Lindsey. I had known him since he was in the House.
Yep.
And he's had the same chief of staff all through that time, a guy named Richard Perry, who's a good guy.
Which speaks well to him.
Yeah, and one of his top political guys who used to be his legislative director is a guy named Andrew King that I'm real close to. I was texting with him yesterday about it, and I mean that whole team is in shock and they're devastated. It's a sad thing, and it's going to actually impact Ukraine, I think, because he's also the foreign ops appropriations chairman, subcommittee chairman, and appropriations. So he had his finger on the pulse of what was happening all around the world, and he was a close ally to President Trump, as you know, even though they were political opponents, and he's come out and he said some pretty horrible things about President Trump.
Yep.
They always found their way to get back together, and they were friends, and then they'd be playing golf together. So,
and then, of course, just coming back from the Ukraine. You know, Brad, just real quick as we let you go, it's interesting, rather eventful period during the summer, unexpectedly, with the U.S. Senate. If you look at the mess in Maine with Graham Plattner, unfortunately, I won't have to say his name much more on my show. They'll put someone else in there. So you have that big mess, but eventually a matchup in Maine. You got the open Senate race here in New Hampshire. You just explained kind of what you think will happen with Mitch McConnell and then the passing of Lindsey Graham. So a lot of, I guess, volatility in and around the U.S. Senate as we go into the midterms.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of volatility. And it's going to be interesting to see how the governor handles the process for, does he put a placeholder in there who is not going to run? That's what I'm interested in. And if he does, there's a lot of talk that it may be Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Nordone is the last name. I don't know what he's going to do. Trey Gowdy is a name that's being mentioned, a former congressman from there. You know, I'm surprised Nikki Haley's name has not been mentioned, and I think it's just because Donald Trump doesn't like her.
Well, I did see a story, and I'm trying to think this morning that she is looking at that U.S. Senate possibility, and I don't know where that was, a national story, or it might have been in South Carolina media. So she might have surfaced. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if she runs, she's going to be kind of running on her own. It's not going to be part of you know the Trump team, if you will. She'll be running, but there's other names out there. I mean, I know a guy who's a U.S. attorney down there, Brian Sterling, who would be great. He worked. He was Nikki Haley's chief of staff, and he was the head of corrections down there for a while. He's a political guy. I'm wondering if he's looking at it. Then I know you have Ralph Norman, Congressman Norman, and I think that there's going to be a whole host. Nancy Mace is somebody who might run again. You know, she was just running for governor. So I think it's going to be crowded field there.
All right. I appreciate it, Brad. We'll catch you tomorrow on Contact Politics. Stay cool.
Hey, buddy. We'll see you.
Coming up, we're going to hear from Dean Spilio to Southern New Hampshire University. And, of course, the first half hour of the show, we're streaming on YouTube at the Pulse of an H on this Monday. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Back in a moment. New
by R&D Paving. Good morning, New Hampshire, live from the New England College Studios. Now, back to Jack on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, we are back, and it is a Monday, and we have nice, beautiful weather this weekend. Yesterday was gorgeous, whatever you were doing. Beautiful sunshine, nice little breeze, beautiful summer weather. Today's nice. Going to get warmer as we get into the afternoon, because tomorrow's going to be that sweltering stuff again. We are back into the hot stuff tomorrow. Going to feel like 100 in much of our listening region. Tomorrow, Tuesday, and today, upper 80s. Getting a lot of reaction because it is, if you're not into politics, it might not seem like that big of a deal. But Lindsey Graham was certainly one of the bigger characters. And I say that in a positive way, funny way, in a very serious business and world. He kind of made politics, believe it or not, look like somewhat fun for him. He had quite a career going back to the House. We had Governor Kelly Ayotte live coming out of the gate this morning at 9, remembering him. When she was in the Senate, she worked very closely with Graham and John McCain. A lot of people don't know that John McCain was the other sort of Senate comedian. People don't realize John McCain, his incredible military experience and senator and presidential run against former President Obama. McCain won 2 New Hampshire presidential primaries here, not one. And Mike Dennehy will be joining us in the next hour, remembering John McCain and Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham actually was no stranger at all to this state or my show over the years. He was on my show quite a bit. He'd always start off with that. He didn't have like a really strong South Carolina accent, but he'd always start off with, "Hey, Jack," and he'd start off with kind of a humorous poke at himself or one of his colleagues, and then he'd get serious. But he was a very unusually humorous person. And I do think what we're hearing is that's what's needed sometimes, is a little bit of humor. And you've heard me say on my show over the last couple of years, is it's not just the void in the U.S. Senate with Senator Graham's passing and that sense of humor that Governor Ayotte talked about just at the top of the show this morning live, calling in, remembering her friend. She also said she's going to go to any services anywhere, whether they're in D.C. or in South Carolina. But sense of humor in life, we don't, all of us in this day and age, and social media makes it worse. Everything is so damn serious and so intense. And so just look at people when they're driving, and people are people are on edge, and we don't have, and it could be we don't have as much to laugh about anymore, but Senator Graham always found something whenever he was on my show anyway, as an interview, something that I think was funny. And he was quite a character, but also a very successful political, really chess player in the U.S. Senate and in life. And sudden passing, Dean Spiliotis, one of our regular political analysts and all-stars, retired political scientist, Southern New Hampshire University, joining us, talking about just Senator Lindsey Graham and his place in American politics with news of his sudden passing this weekend. Good morning, Dean.
Hey, good morning, Jack. Yeah, I'll start off on a personal note. Back when he ran in 2016 for president, I was part of a panel that did a public event for him. We basically asked him questions, and I had my late mother with me at the time to meet him and to kind of watch the event, because she was visiting. And before the event, he kind of watched me interacting with my mom. And then after the event, he walked over to my mother and said, "Anybody who treats his mama the way your son does is okay with me." It was really a very sort of Southern kind of classic Lindsey Graham moment. But I think his legacy is going to be as a deal maker. For many years, that deal making was in the context of the three amigos, with Republican John McCain and moderate Democrat Joe Lieberman, also VP nominee. Now all three of those men are gone. I mean, it's just a remarkable changing of the guard over the last 10 years or so. And so he's been a deal maker all along. I think his biggest, in recent years, he's become a bit of a Trump whisperer. He's kind of, he likes to be in the game. He knows how to use proximity to power, and shifted off of McCain after McCain's passing and
Mm-hmm.
towards Donald Trump. But I will say, probably for me, his most consistent legacy is he is, in an era where many Republicans are talking about no forever wars and America first and a more isolationist foreign and military stance. Lindsey Graham is always kind of sort of a classic Republican war hawk interventionist. He really believed that American power, military, diplomatic, could be used for good around the world, to democratize the world, to help people who were suffering, et cetera. And so, we saw he was just in Ukraine. He was a
Right.
big proponent of helping Ukraine.
Right.
And he was also a stalwart ally of Israel, and was also, closely involved in wanting to so-called finish the job with Iran. So his foreign policy cred will always be that, as kind of a classic Republican hawk. There was a time back in the day where he was focused on things like climate change and immigration reform, and that kind of changed over the years as he gravitated more towards President Trump.
And 30 plus years, Air Force Reserves, retiring as a colonel. People may not know that about him.
Lawyer.
Yeah, people may not know that. What I asked Governor Ayotte this, and she said it's disgusting, but it is what it is. I mean, she said it. She doesn't understand. I was sort of not. You're a political scientist, not me, although I did major in that, but that doesn't count for being a professor.
Well, I majored in history, so you actually got me beat there.
Well, but I want to be serious here because it speaks to Americana, our political landscape. It's just a really very turbulent time. And I wasn't shocked, but I was a little surprised over the weekend, yesterday afternoon, even some New Hampshire notables who are very pronounced on the far left side of the aisle, saying very, very what I would call, let's just say, non-Christian, non-nice post about Lindsey Graham. I won't even dignify who they are. One saying he didn't have a spine. I hope he has a soul. And then one of my contributors commented about that, and she's coming on today. And I'm not surprised, though, that people, their politics are just so, I don't know what the word is, Dean, so deep-rooted and mean that they don't really care. If someone in the opposition dies, they're doing the happy dance. And I'm looking at this going, even in New Hampshire, it's pretty pathetic. But can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've said many times, I think it's a function of the digital age. Social media has kind of broken down the norms about, putting a filter on things when you're in public. Maybe the things you say to your family or your close friends in private are different than what you say publicly as you engage in the world. That filter, that wall has been completely broken down by smartphones, social media, Twitter. I mean, there's always been kind of toxic commentary on both sides, going back years, but it was kind of a niche thing. It was on the fringe. You had to kind of go look for it. Now we have technology that essentially feeds it to you. And it's really, it's brought out the worst in a lot of people.
In fairness, it happens both sides. In fairness.
Absolutely.
I mean even the president sometimes has been less than gracious on political foes.
Trump just celebrated the death of Robert Mueller not that long ago.
Right.
And so they see that and they say, well, if he can do it, why can't we do it?
Right.
It's just, the whole thing is horrible. I'm not condoning it on either side. I think it's just having been old enough to know what the old dialogue and discourse was like, it's just really one of the things that genuinely makes me sad about politics now.
What's your sense on the races here? Are they starting to heat up in the congressional, the federal seats, the U.S. Senate matchup, governor? I think starting to get a little more defined, or still forming?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit more. I think that the CD1, I think CD2 with Goodlander and Williams, I don't think there's that much going on there. I think Goodlander will probably win pretty comfortably. But the first CD, which was the seat that Chris Pappas is vacating, you've got the competitive primaries. You've got 5 or 6 Republicans. You've got 5 or 6 Democrats. You've got the Shaheen-Sullivan dynamic, the 2 front runners there. That's fascinating. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting race. And, on the Senate seat, as we've talked before, a lot of it really depends on how much Scott Brown is willing to kind of slash and burn to try to bring Sununu down.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I think it's just going to kind of continue on, and it won't really heat up until the fall.
All right, Dean, stay cool, as they say, especially tomorrow. Dean Spelliot of Southern New Hampshire
Thanks,
University.
Jack.
Thank you. I do want to state on my show that I reached out yesterday on Sunday, respectfully, to the media and chiefs for both U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who traveled and worked a lot with Lindsey Graham over the years across the aisle, and Senator Maggie Hassan's folks, and both had scheduling conflicts basically this morning in terms of calling in to remember Senator Lindsey Graham. Both Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan had scheduling conflicts, according to their folks. They did release statements, but I wanted them on the show. We had Governor Kelly Ayotte live this morning, remembering Senator Graham. And in a little bit, it's going to be fun, is Mike Dennehy is probably the other New Hampshire notable, politically speaking, on the Republican side, who spent so much time, in the car and the rigs and the planes, campaigning and just having dinners and talking with Lindsey Graham in New Hampshire and beyond, with the late Senator John McCain, who also, by the way, was quite a character. People didn't realize that John McCain had an incredible wise guy sense of humor, and I'm being respectful totally, because he would pull his John McCain wit with me when I was interviewing him. He was apt, and then he get very serious, but very, very sort of self-deprecating and diffusing in an interview by sort of cracking a joke about himself or something and then getting serious. McCain and Lindsey Graham had that art down, and sadly, one thing that will be missing from this, forget your politics and your social media crap, is his sense of humor, because not only the Senate, but the country and our society needs more humor, not less, and some commentary. All right, 603-228-2080. Doug Tengden, World Market Advisors. Market's down this morning, and not surprising, and it's all triggered by hostilities getting pretty intense again in the Middle East with Iran and places like the Strait of Hormuz. Oil uncertainty, markets don't like that, so we'll continue there, and the ups and downs continuing, and I'm not sure. I think kind of what the economy is right now is what it's going to be for a while. The question is going to be, you start to see the price of gas for a regular gallon of gas coming down to that $3.75 range. Question is, will it stay coming down or not come down much more? We'll talk with our experts. Top of the 10 o'clock, Neil Levesque will join us. 11 o'clock, we're packed. We got Rory O'Neill, Alicia Preston-Xanthopoulos, Seacoast Online, and, of course, Tom Raffio with some good news on a Monday. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an Age. Heat is back tomorrow, real hot tomorrow. Back in a moment.
107. are taught to do it right. Now back to Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right. Hey, thanks for making us your top choice for news talk in our region and beyond. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the Pulse of NH. We are streaming up on YouTube at the Pulse of NH, and our poll question up on X at the Pulse of NH, and everything with us is the Pulse of NH. Literally. Have you taken a summer vacation yet this year? Yes or no? Some would say just these weekends, like this weekend was like a vacation. Beautiful weather yesterday and over the weekend. Real hot stuff returning tomorrow. And we are going to feel like it's back up at 100 in our listening region tomorrow, Tuesday. And it stays warm into Wednesday, but the real hot stuff sounds like it's tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night. All right, as we get back, I was just talking about the economy. Doug Tengden, worldmarketadvisors.com, joining us, our economic thinker and energizer. And, Doug, I think uncertainty is continuing, obviously, with the situation in the Middle East, Strait of Hormuz, the war in Iran, and the president commenting this morning on that. Oil prices don't like that. Markets are down. Other than that, and things are expensive, things are great. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Jack. Yeah, the uncertainty in the Gulf is, well, when has the Gulf not been uncertain? Since February? I think that's the markets have kind of baked that in. The thing that's got the market riled up this morning is the Korean stock market that seems to be melting down at least a little bit. It's been on a roar, and now it's pulling back at a very interesting time.
What's driving that?
Well, SK Hynix is the Korean chip maker that raised $30 billion last year, the most ever, last week, just on Friday, the most ever raised in the U.S. stock market for a foreign issue. And they're down about, just this morning, about 10%. They were up 15%. They were up 15% on Friday. They're down 15%. Is
that just the natural bubble burst after a huge IPO?
Yes, a bubble burst after a huge IPO, and who knows? Maybe the beginning of some kind of a correction. Wouldn't surprise any observers to see a correction in this AI trade, which has just been a one-way trade from the lower left to the upper right, all across the charts, all the U.S. issuers as well.
Doug, you and I have talked about this. I was talking with a realtor friend over the weekend, going back to Stephen Janot, Bank of America, saying he wouldn't be surprised if there are 3.25% interest rate hikes by the Fed between now and the end of the year to stifle inflation, because he said, a couple months ago, consumer spending was up year over year, up 4%. So that was staying ahead of inflation. And now that's not necessarily the case, because inflation's about twice as high as the Fed wants. You're one of the few economists or experts that doesn't feel we'll see 3 interest rate hikes. I hope we don't, by the way. I hope we don't. But what are you thinking? Because it does impact borrowing and things like buying a house and things. I just saw over the weekend the median home price in New Hampshire set another record, the most recent measurement. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was looking at some economic stuff over the weekend. It shows you the kind of life I live. And I became that apart from a gorgeous weekend and the Prouty weekend here, I became more convinced that the Fed is going to stay on hold. I respect Stephen Janot. I think he's a good economist, but I think he's looking at old data. I think that the Fed is going to have a tailwind of lower oil prices that feed through. The oil is, it's interesting. We have these pressures, and instead of oil spiking to 120, it's spiking to 78 from 72. I think we're going to have a tailwind of lower oil prices. Gas prices are going to feed through lower, and so that's going to take some of the pressure off. We're going to see inflation.
What's going to drive lower oil prices if we have uncertainty in the Strait of Hormuz globally?
A combination of things. Both oil coming through the Straits of Hormuz, and now we've got to call it the Straits because there's these two passages, one next to Oman and one next to Iran. Oil is coming through. The U.S. Navy, God bless them, is escorting ships. And the closure of the Straits is a depreciating asset for the Iranians. Saudi Arabia has an alternative way to get oil to the market. There are going to be more pipelines that are going to be set up that take oil in a different direction. I think that's going to become increasingly apparent. And we have alternatives to oil. We've got in China, electric vehicles outpace gas vehicles. I think it's by 2-to-1 at this point. So oil is not seeing the same demand that it was, even 10 years ago.
But we're not seeing that here. I mean, in other words, we saw the buildup towards electric vehicles a number of years ago recently, and then it's the big manufacturers pulled the other way because consumers weren't digging it. So even with the war with Iran and the uncertainty of oil and gas and the spike we just saw in the last several months, we don't see the big U.S. auto players or even some of the other big players making vehicles here, like it could be Japanese made or whatever, going back to electric as big as I thought. It's sort of a pullback the other way here.
Yeah. Pull up a monthly energy report from the U.S. Department of Energy. U.S. production is just starting to tick up these higher prices. But remember, before the war, we were seeing 60s and even 50s in oil. Now they're well set in the 70s. And some of these producers locked in 80s and 90s in the futures market. So they're starting to tick up production. You're seeing that in the U.S. We're going to see more production. That supply response that we talked about a month or so ago is starting to kick in.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
The other thing is, it's not great news, but I looked at employment over the weekend, and over the last year, what has employment done? It's actually flat. Employment in the United States, the number of people employed, and you can say, well, it's a lack of people flooding in over the border, or it's a lack of this, a lack of that. The fact is, employment is flat over the last year, and the Fed has never raised rates when employment is flat or declining. And for good reason. They have a dual mandate. I think they have a lot of flexibility. If this were Europe, Jack, they would have already raised rates because they have a one size fits all policy, which is inflation and cut it. In the U.S., we look at more than just one thing.
Okay, but if employment, or what you just say, the employment picture is sort of flat.
That's right.
But my concern is, are people's salaries and what they're making keeping up with the cost of living?
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing is that actually consumption is picked up. And this is inflation-weighted consumption, but inflation-weighted incomes, again, are flat. They're not picking up. So there's a clear divergence between consumption and income. I think people are saving in order to support that consumption. And you just have a little bit of a pullback, say a 10%, 20% pullback in the market, and that's going to pull back on consumption. And the Fed is not going to be raising rates in the teeth of that.
So in all your analysis over the last 8 or 9 or 10 minutes, you didn't say the R word, no recession word at all you see through the end of the year?
Absolutely. The AI trade is still strong. These companies are still investing dramatically in data centers, power centers, and now we're going to see energy production. But that's going to support the economy.
So absolutely not is what you're saying.
Absolutely not.
All right.
There's no R word here, and I also didn't mention the C word. I didn't attribute the inflation to that place that you don't want me to talk about.
No, please. It makes him PTSD when you have anything with the word COVID. Thank you, Doug. Hey, Alexa. Thank you.
You have a great week.
All right, stay cool tomorrow. Hey, Alexa, Google, put the pulse of an H. Neil Levesque on deck next.